What's up, guys? It's Toad, and we're talking college football championship week. We're at the end of the season. The season's over, man. These are the conference championships, and this is another week where there's motivation at play, usually in some of the bigger conferences, which is normally where I go to. I tend to avoid the smaller conferences in these conference championships, depending on what the situation is, of course, but usually the bigger conferences have the extra like motivational angles that you can get involved with there that have to do with the playoff scenarios, and that's kind of where I'm looking here. And I have two plays on the whole slate here. I might just talk about every single one of these games, though. I probably have some thoughts on all of them, although they're probably not very strong, except for the two plays that I'm actually on. And let's just get right into it, man. Let's do it. The first one, I think both of my plays are Saturday. First one's going to be on Saturday afternoon, and it's Oklahoma State plus 15. It seems ugly. Seems pretty ugly. I'm fading Texas. But, I mean, this is one, when you like start digging into this one, you kind of get the feeling for why I like this one. If you look at the market here, though, Texas has gone way up from minus 11.5 to minus 15.5. So certainly we're getting a decent number on this. It looks like the market has pushed Texas up, though. Although, again, these like opening lines, I don't know like when these lines came out, because a lot of these lines during championship week, they move a ton. I think some of it is because you can put more money down on the games earlier in the week on the championship games. The limits are higher, so that might have something to do with it. But Texas has moved quite a bit, up to 15.5, 69% of the cash on them according to pregame here, and 67% of the tickets. So it looks like Texas has the money discrepancy. I'm not sure if I buy that. As I always say, whenever I think the situation trumps the market, I'm like, yeah, I don't buy that. But I don't. I'm buying Oklahoma State here, and there are some reasons for that. Besides the fact that I think Texas is a public home favorite here, and nobody's going to want anything to do with Oklahoma State here. Texas, I mean, they're the team that the recreational bettors are going to want to look at here. They're the team that's ranked way higher, of course, 7 versus 18. They're a one-loss team. I mean, what have they done really wrong besides lose to Alabama? They beat Alabama. What did I say? They lost to OU, in the Red River rivalry. Yeah, they lost to Oklahoma. So they have one big loss on the season. They beat Alabama. They've looked good all season. Again, what have they done wrong? And now they're coming off absolutely blasting Texas Tech in the final game there, which was a game that didn't really matter. But, I thought it didn't really matter. But Texas showed up for that one, and they just wrecked Texas Tech in their final home game there. Maybe Texas kind of wants to go out with a bang, which is like the only thing that I think is somewhat in favor of Texas here. I think the rest of the situation totally trumps that, though, and has me on Oklahoma State. But the only thing that I can see is that maybe Texas will be a bit motivated here just because it's their last Big 12 game, because I don't think they can make the college football playoff, man. I think they know that. The Big 12 has been kind of down this year, to be honest. And Texas, they suffered that loss early on. And, yeah, they won the rest of their games. They're a one-loss team, but they're sitting at the 7th-ranked team here. And people are talking about the 8th-ranked team, who is Alabama, potentially jumping Texas. Or I think the playoff scenario is such that if Alabama beats Georgia, I think that would be more meaningful. That would be a much bigger win than if Texas beats Oklahoma State in a game that, of course, Texas is supposed to win. So people are basically saying that if Alabama beats Georgia, they might leapfrog Texas, and that they actually have a better chance to get into the college football playoff than Texas does, even though Texas beat Alabama. So Texas might be thinking, like, what is up with that? But I think Texas knows there's really like no scenario that they're going to make the playoff here, even if they're a one-loss team, because you got Georgia is almost certainly in, even if they lose to Alabama. I think they're going to be in the playoff regardless, which might factor into how I lean in that game, but I don't have a play on that one. So there's that. Michigan, I think, even though I think they're almost certainly going to win their game, although I will be talking about that. Michigan, I think, is almost definitely in because they beat Ohio State. There is a chance that Ohio State could slip in if some of these other teams slip up. I think all these teams are ahead of Texas right now. They're one-loss teams. Ohio State doesn't they're not playing anymore, so they're just sitting in a one-loss team, hoping that some teams screw up. And then you got Washington undefeated and Oregon with one loss, which was to Washington. I think whoever wins that Pac-12 matchup, they're going to get into the playoffs. So you got all those teams are ahead of Texas as far as getting to the playoffs. So I think Texas knows, and including I think Alabama might actually be, because they're playing Georgia, that win would mean that much. If they beat Georgia, I think they might leapfrog Texas in the AP poll and actually have a better chance to get into the playoffs. So, yeah, I don't think there's any scenario that Texas can actually make the playoff. So they really don't have that much to play for anymore, other than the fact that maybe they want to win their final Big 12 championship game. However, I think that amount of motivation is going to lack on the Texas side, and they're going to be overvalued because they're coming off such a blowout win over Texas Tech. They looked about as good as you can look. And Oklahoma State, on the other hand, they look awful. People saw it. They barely got by BYU. That game went into overtime, and that was the game that Oklahoma State should have won way more easily. And perhaps they were looking ahead to this one maybe, but they needed to win that BYU game to even get into this game. So I think Oklahoma State's almost free-rolling because they might not have expected to even be here because they were kind of in that battle with Oklahoma, Kansas State. We're all kind of in the mix there. I think Iowa State maybe was, I guess, in the mix as well there, but really Kansas State and Oklahoma, it looked like Oklahoma State might not be able to get in. They might not be able to do it, and they did lose to Iowa State earlier in the season. So, but then they got that big win over OU. And then last week they needed to win, and they did it, even though it was in overtime. They took that bad BYU fumble at the end of the game to seal it for Oklahoma State there. But I think Oklahoma State, like I said, I think they're playing with house money here, man. They didn't totally expect to be in this game a couple weeks ago. Now they're here, and they're facing Texas. They're getting a ton of points. Mike Gundy, as coach, has been really good as in the underdog role, as a big underdog. I like it. I think Texas doesn't have that much motivation here. Like I said, it all kind of hinges on whether or not they're going to get up for their final Big 12 game, because I think they know they're not making the playoffs. So their season is basically done at this point, even though, yeah, they're going to want to beat Oklahoma State. But I think Oklahoma State, it's going to kind of matter more to them a little bit because they're staying in the Big 12. Texas is going away. I think Oklahoma State is going to want to slam the door on Texas. They're going to want to let that door hit Texas right in the ass on their way out. I think Oklahoma State's going to want to hand them a loss, smack them on the ass on the way out, man. I think it's a big motivating factor for Oklahoma State there. They're going to want to do that. And yeah, so I think Oklahoma State is the more motivated team here. And if anything, I think because these are going to be Big 12 officials, maybe they have like a little bit of something to say about Texas there. And maybe they're going to want to stick it to Texas a little bit and maybe not give them the benefit of some of the calls there. So I'm on it. I'm on Oklahoma State plus 15. That is the weaker of these two plays, though. But I like it because I think Texas is going to be the overvalued team here. And I think motivationally, they don't have that much going on, even though at first glance, it might look like, well, they do have something to play for. It's the Big 12 championship, of course, and they're a one-loss team, so can they make the playoffs? But I think the answer to that is almost certainly not. I think almost definitely they have no chance to make the playoffs. And I wanted to look at one other thing with Texas as far as their quarterback situation here, because Ewers has been kind of in and out, but I do think that he was he playing in this game? Maybe he wasn't even playing in this game. Yeah, he was. So Ewers came back because he was, he was actually injured for a little while, but he came back. So I think that's going to be kind of a non-factor here, but he is back. He'll be playing for Texas. So if anything, that just kind of jacks the line up a little bit more in Texas. And this is also a game where the total isn't really that high for a Big 12 college football game here in the 50s at 54.5, even though it looks like the over is getting a little bit of play there. But I like it. I like Oklahoma State for all the reasons I just stated. That's play number one. And the other play is going to be the final game, I believe, on the slate. I like this one. And it's Iowa. Plus 24 is what I got, although I think that number is probably gone now. I don't think you can get that number anymore. I don't know, because the line has been kind of all over the place. Michigan was 23, and then it looks like it's 22 now, but I think it was 23 and a half for a while, in the 23 range for a while. It was 22 and a half for a while. I think right now it's like 23, 22 and a half at most places, even though this says it's 22. I think you can find numbers like that. I fortunately was just watching the numbers, and I was able to find I was just waiting to see will it get to 24, and I saw it happen today. I picked one of them off, and I grabbed it, so I got them at 24. I think even at 23 or 20, yeah, even 22 and a half, I think is still all right. With Iowa, I think this is the strongest play on the board for motivational reasons. Michigan is at six. They have 65% of the tickets, but 52% of the cash is on Iowa. So I think that the market discrepancy, the cash discrepancy, the market activity looks like it's definitely indicating on Iowa there. And there's a lot that I like about this. I think this game really doesn't matter that much to Michigan. You might say, well, Michigan needs to remain undefeated to get into the playoff. I think that's probably the case. Yeah, I think if they lose this game, I think that they might be in danger of getting knocked out of the playoff, yes. But the fact that they're basically in the playoff right now and probably think that they're going to easily win this game, that sets up a spot where I think this is a sandwich spot for Michigan, man. That's what I think. Michigan's coming off what was their conference championship game, really, the game against Ohio State. And they were able to beat Ohio State yet again, which they've done, I think, a few times in a row now. That's their big game, man. Michigan versus Ohio State, that's the big rivalry. They just happen to be in the same division of the Big Ten. They kind of both know they're the top two teams in the Big Ten. That was really the de facto Big Ten championship game. And now you're coming off that huge win, huge rivalry. I think you're going to be in a bit of a letdown spot here. You got to go play Iowa, and Iowa has a really, really ugly offense, which is going to keep bettors away from them. Bettors don't like betting teams like Iowa that can't play offense. And if you're Michigan, I think you're probably going to win this game pretty easily. So there's not much there for Michigan, and I think it makes it a sandwich because they're already going to have one eye forward looking to prepare for the college football playoff. So I think it's a bad spot where they might just kind of want to get in and get out, because they know they're such a big favorite. They're going to want to kind of already be preparing for that college football playoff game that they're most likely going to be in, and they're not going to want to show like all the tricks that they have. They're not going to want to get people injured. So I think they might treat this game like that when they're such a heavy favorite. And I think that's going to mean there's going to be value on Iowa getting all those points there, because Iowa, like I said with Oklahoma State, Iowa's free rolling here, man. Iowa, I don't think they particularly expected to be in this game, but they're there. They're in it. They know that they're not playing to get into the college football playoff or anything like that. This is their game. I think this is a much bigger game for them. They have not had big games recently. They won 4 games in a row against kind of some of the lower teams in the conference, and that culminated in them beating Nebraska, unfortunately for me, because I thought that was a bad spot for Iowa, because they were already locked into this conference championship game, but they were able to win, and they won that really ugly game against Nebraska, which, again, I think is going to give us more value on Iowa here, because people see all these ridiculously low-scoring, just hideous games being played by Iowa. The public is not going to want to bet a team like that. Even if they're getting a ton of points, they're not going to want anything to do with Iowa here. They're going to think this is a complete mismatch. This is Michigan against Iowa. They just saw Michigan beat Ohio State, a huge game, whereas Iowa almost lost to Nebraska. People are going to look at that and think, like, yeah, they're not going to want Iowa at all here, but that just gives us more value on Iowa. And just like I alluded to, but I forgot to kind of explicitly mention with Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State also, they had a really ugly game last week against a BYU team that's been no good this year, and it required them going into overtime and required BYU fumbling at the end of that for Oklahoma State to even win that game, to get that escape there. So I think that is a motivational factor for Oklahoma State there when you have that near loss like that. And for Iowa, it's just kind of an ugly game. Again, that was kind of an escape for Iowa as well against a team that they kind of know they're better than, even though the line wound up being Nebraska, a 3-point favorite in that game. And I think I had them as a 2-point favorite or something like that. But that was still just kind of like an ugly game and an escape for Iowa. I think Iowa's going to want to show up here, whereas Michigan, like I said, they might not want to pull out all the stops for this one, because they think they're just going to want to get in and get out. They think this is kind of an easier game. They don't want people to get injured. They're coming off their biggest game. This game means way more to Iowa than it does to Michigan. Michigan's previous game is the game that meant a ton to Michigan, and then the game that they have upcoming likely in the playoff is also what means something to Michigan. So I think the motivational angles are all on Iowa here, and this is a really, really low total, of course, because it's an Iowa game, and these teams both play defense, so more and more factors just line me up on Iowa here. I mean, this is a total of 35, extremely low total, and you're getting, I took 24 points in a game where the total is 35, so like the line is basically telling you Iowa's like almost not even going to score in this game, and I think Michigan, they might let up enough, like defensively. They might not play as intensely as they might in a game that matters a little bit more, such that Iowa might be able to get some points on the board here and come within that number. That's what I think. I think it is going to be low scoring. Iowa certainly has a really good defense. That is their strength, defense and special teams. And when you're getting so many points like that, that's what you want. You want a team that plays really good defense and can hold the other offense in check, and that's what Iowa can do. So that all lines me up on Iowa as well. The fact that these points with a total that low, every point is worth even more that you can get on the underdog. So that is meaningful as well. And I think people are going to look at their schedules and say, well, Iowa, they only played one good game, one good team, all year in Penn State. And it was a game where they played horribly, and they lost 31-0. So, of course, they're going to get blown out by Michigan, who's even better than Penn State. And not only is Michigan better than Penn State, but Michigan played at Penn State and beat them. And I think they beat them by either double digits or maybe it was 9, because I think Penn State scored late to make it cosmetically look a little bit better than it was. Yeah, so people are going to do that like syllogism thing again, too, and see Penn State wrecked Iowa at Penn State, but Michigan went into Penn State and beat Penn State at Penn State. So, of course, Michigan's going to be able to beat Iowa by more than Penn State did, right? That's what people are going to think. Again, I think the situation, all these angles are going against it. I think the fact that people are going to look at it that way, that's just going to mean there's even more value in Iowa, I think. And the other thing here is that Michigan, when they were playing earlier this season, some of these games down the stretch here, they were without Jim Harbaugh because there was that suspension. They were without their coach because of the scandal that was going on. So I think they played a couple of those games without him. I think that's maybe sparked the team a little bit there. But now Harbaugh's coming back in this game, and there's that scandal surrounding him. I mentioned last week, I thought it was kind of a good thing that he wasn't there for the Ohio State game. I thought that might be kind of a motivational factor and might maybe undervalue Michigan a little bit, even though maybe they got a little bit lucky to come away with the cover in that one. But I thought, yeah, it might mean that Michigan was a little bit undervalued because of the scandal. People were going to kind of think that was affecting them a little bit or whatever. But now I think with Harbaugh coming back, I think that's where it might kind of have a little bit of impact. His first game back, it might kind of throw a wrench into things a little bit, and you kind of have that scandal looming over your head again after you kind of were able to put it to the side. Now he's coming back. I actually think that's kind of a negative in the first game here, so that's an added thing. So all these angles, man, just line up on Iowa. I think it's the best play of the week, even though it's such a gigantic underdog, and both of these are huge underdogs. So I like Iowa. That's the way I'm going. And then quickly, let's look at these other games here. Still going long on these. We got all these championship games, man. Oregon in the Pac-12 game, they're up from 7.5 to 10 with 58% of the cash, 58% of the tickets. I think more of the cash is probably on Oregon than the tickets, even though it doesn't say that here. I know that there are professional guys on Oregon. I think 9.5 is actually the predominant number there, and I think if you can get it at below 10, I would lean to Oregon there. I think it's a suspicious-looking line because people are going to look at that and think, well, wait a minute, though. Washington was favored when they played Oregon this year, and that was, I believe, Oregon's only loss of the year was to Washington. Washington beat them by 3 at Washington, and Washington was like a favorite of a couple points. People are going to look at that and say, well, what gives here? How is Oregon a huge favorite now against Washington, even though Washington beat them the one time they played them this year and was favored against them? Like, what's going on here? What's changed? Sometimes I'd say that's an overreaction, but in this case, I really don't think so. I think this is just a case of the market finally catching up to what these teams actually are. And Washington hasn't really looked that good down the stretch. I mean, of course, they've had a target on their back because they're undefeated. That pressure is mounting and mounting and mounting on them, I think. And now we get to this situation now, and I think Washington is actually, as the books are telling you, Oregon is actually the better team over Washington. Washington is not actually the better team, even though they're the undefeated team, and they beat Oregon earlier this year, and Oregon does have that one loss, which was to Washington, which, yeah, maybe that'll add a little bit of like extra like revenge motivation there in Oregon, but I don't weigh that heavily. I think Oregon is just the better all-around team. They certainly have the much better defense than Washington. I think they even have the slightly better offense than Washington as well as Washington's offense has played down the stretch. They haven't been playing as well, and Oregon has really been playing lights out. So that stuff is factored into the line as well, which I think, again, you might say that might overvalue Oregon a little bit, but I really don't think so. I think that the line looks so suspicious. Like, why is Oregon favored by that much? I think Oregon is indeed the significantly better team, and that's the only way I would look in that one. In the whatever conference this is, USA, you have New Mexico State against Liberty. Liberty's up from 6.5 to 11. A huge line move on Liberty to drive them up that high, but it looks like there's buyback at this point on New Mexico State as the double-digit underdog now. 64% of the tickets on Liberty, but 57% of the cash on New Mexico State there. And, of course, the public's going to like Liberty in that one more so because Liberty is the ranked team. They're ranked in the top 25 right now, and they're undefeated, so they're going to like that aspect about Liberty. They know the name Liberty, but New Mexico State, I don't know. I think New Mexico State's a team that's kind of flying under the radar a little bit. They're a team that's kind of in and out of like the bowl scenario. And I think New Mexico State, like, they probably didn't expect to be in this game. Liberty kind of expected to be there all year. They've been leading all year. And again, when you're undefeated like that and you're the team that's atop the conference all year, you kind of have that target on your back, man. New Mexico State might kind of just be playing with house money at this point, like I've said with some of these other teams. So I would, have a slight opinion to New Mexico State, and that one just a little bit, because I think there's just going to be no value to be had on a Liberty team that's done basically nothing wrong this year. So that's the way I look at that. Miami, Ohio, and Toledo in the MAC championship. Toledo has gone up from 6.5 through the 7 to 7.5. It looks like it might even be going higher than that, even though this market percentages here look like these market percentages look like it's 78% of the cash on Miami, Ohio, but 60% of the tickets on Miami, Ohio. I'm not sure how accurate that is with the cash discrepancy being on Miami, Ohio, because Toledo has moved up to the 7.5 point favorite. And if I was gonna, I would lean Toledo here, but because I think they are definitely the better team, and this line is telling you that. But I think obviously it would be better to get it at 7 or less than 7 there, which it was earlier. So I think maybe you missed the boat a little bit if you have to lay like the hook or even more than that. But I think the public is going to think that there's value in taking Miami, Ohio, because of what they saw when these two teams played each other earlier this year. Toledo, I think, had an escape, and they won the game, I think maybe by 1 point or something like that in that game. So people might look at that and think, well, of course, Miami, Ohio is going to be able to play them close. And in that game, I think that game was at Miami, Ohio, and the line was obviously not Toledo being favored by 7.5 in that one. I think it was a close line, close to a pick 'em. And I'd mentioned that I kind of liked Toledo in that one because I thought they were definitely the better team, which I think they still are, and this line is telling you that. Toledo's pretty good on offense. They're very balanced offense, and they're a team that's kind of been here before, man. Been here, done that type of thing. They've been one of the top teams in the MAC, I think, for the during the recent season. So I think they have kind of the experience factor going for them as well. Miami, Ohio, kind of slipped into this game because they were able to beat Ohio in an upset during the season, because I think Ohio is actually the best team in that division of the MAC, better than Miami, Ohio. Although you might say that might give Miami, Ohio a little bit of motivation, maybe, because they know they're the underdog here, and maybe they got kind of that house money aspect a little bit there, because maybe they didn't expect to be here. But I think once they beat Ohio, they did expect to be here, because there wasn't that much that was going to knock them out of this game at that point. So that's the way I look at that. I think it comes down to just a numbers game on that one. I think Toledo is the better team, and the line makes it look like there's value on Miami, Ohio, or I think maybe there isn't. So that's the way I look at that one. In the Mountain West, Boise is up from -1 to -2.5, even though they're on the road at UNLV. You can see where these games are being played. So the MAC championship game is on a neutral in Detroit. Most of these big conference games are all in neutral, so that Texas one is in Arlington, Texas. The Liberty one is being played at Liberty, I believe, in Lynchburg, Virginia. I think Liberty's hosting that one. The Pac-12 is in neutral in Las Vegas. So this Mountain West is actually being hosted by UNLV, I believe. That's at their stadium in Las Vegas. They have 76% of the cash, but 70% of the tickets, it looks like, on UNLV as the home underdog. I'm not sure I buy that. What I do buy is that UNLV is going to be the public team, because people are going to look at this and think, how is Boise favored here? Boise's a team that's 7-5, and they were 4-5 earlier this year. They had to reel off 3 wins at the end of the season to get into this game. And they did it against some decent teams, some of the better teams in the Mountain West, I think. Both of these teams beat Air Force down the stretch, but Air Force lost their quarterback at some point, and they really just got sent spiraling after they had a great start to the season, and they were ranked, and they were undefeated, and then their season just came really crashing down. So a little bowl preview. I might be looking to go against Air Force in whatever bowl they're in, because I think they're going to be a disappointed team after they had those high aspirations kind of there. They didn't even make the Mountain West championship at this point, and they were looking undefeated and looking to, like, they were going to move on to bigger and better things, and they came really crashing down there. But back to this game, I think the line looks suspicious. You got Boise favored on the road, even though they're a 7-5 team against a 9-3 UNLV team. The odds makers are telling you Boise is actually the better team here, so that's the way I would look in this one, even though the line's moved up a little bit. If you can get it at below 3, I think I would still be comfortable laying points with Boise there when it's still kind of just a pick the winner situation, where maybe find like a money line play on it. That's the way I look there. UNLV, I mean, they've been a good story, but they're also kind of in uncharted waters here as well, hosting a Mountain West championship game. And yeah, even though, they did lose last week, they still were able to host, they're still hosting this game now. But yeah, and they're coming off a loss, so maybe they're going to want to bounce back from that. But I think more so it was that San Jose State kind of gave them a reality check there, whereas San Jose State, they were almost able to get into this game as well. San Jose State, they're actually a good team. They're actually a better team than UNLV, as well, as that line suggested last week. And I had mentioned that I leaned San Jose State in that one. San Jose State did wind up beating UNLV. So you might say, well, UNLV might be in a little bit of a bounce back because of that, whereas Boise's won 3 straight games, so maybe they're in a letdown. I don't think there's going to be such a thing as a letdown in a game like this, where if the team is motivated to win this championship game, which I think Boise is, because Boise had such a bad start to the season, I don't think they expected to be here at all. UNLV, since they beat Air Force at the very least, I think they expected, like, we're definitely going to be in this game here. So Boise is a team that kind of slipped into this, and again, like I said, the line looks suspicious. Boise's got the worst record, but they're actually the better team here, so that's the way I would look in that one. In the American Championship game, that's SMU and Tulane. I believe that game is being hosted by Tulane in New Orleans. The line's gone down, though, a little bit. It looks like on Tulane from -4 to -3.5 at home, with 85% of the cash on SMU and 72% of the tickets on SMU. This game is one of the toughest ones to read, I would say, because both of these teams have been good. They've both been playing pretty well down the stretch as well. SMU really has reeled off like a bunch of good games in a row, I think, bunch of wins in a row, and they wound up 1 game behind Tulane. Tulane is in the rankings, whereas I think SMU is not, but I don't know if people are going to look at that and think that means Tulane is actually the better team, which this line is kind of telling you they are, because they are the favorite at home, and I think they're getting a little bit more than just the home advantage here. I think they're the slightly better team, but our recreational bettor is going to look at this and think, well, these teams have really close records, and SMU's been playing really well recently. They're SMU's getting points, so thinking this might be kind of an even matchup here, that there's value in taking SMU. It's hard to read. It's hard to figure out which way I would go here. I think maybe the experience aspect is what it comes down to here with Tulane. Tulane, even though they had some turnover, they do still have some guys who were in that big bowl game that they won that I was on last year against a disappointed USC team there, but that was a crazy game. Tulane, big game for Tulane. Tulane was able to get that huge win in that bowl game, one of the biggest wins in their program history against USC. So I think Tulane's got the experience factor a little bit there, as weird as it is to say, because they haven't really been doing anything as far as college football is concerned until all of a sudden, like last year and this year, they've been really good. But they do have Pratt, their quarterback that they had last year, and some of the guys around him are back from last year. So I think they do have the big game experience a little bit on their side there. So maybe a very slight opinion on Tulane there. I don't want to necessarily have an opinion on every one of these games, but It's the way it is, I guess. SEC championship game. This is a huge game with playoff implications. This is in Atlanta, so it's a neutral site game, even though it is in Georgia. It's not at Georgia's home stadium. Georgia's gone up from a 4-point favorite to a 6-point favorite with 71% of the cash, but 61% of the tickets. So it looks like there is some money and a cash discrepancy on Georgia, pushing Georgia up to a 6. I kind of lean Alabama in this one, man, even though I know there are some professionals on the Georgia side here. I think if you look at what these teams did last week, I think that's kind of what does it for me here. Alabama, everybody's just saying they should have lost to Auburn last week. They had a horrible showing, and I think they were probably looking ahead to this game because I think they were already locked into this game, right? I think they were. They just basically didn't even show up against Auburn, and Auburn went all out. It was a big game for Auburn. It was a big underdog. They wanted to beat Alabama, and they should have. Auburn had the lead, and it required Alabama converting a 4th and 31 at the end of that game, which they did for a touchdown, which is how they won that game. And then, of course, there was that pick 6 after that got called back, which was the correct call because the guy who was returning the pick did indeed step out of bounds. So that was the correct call in the end, that he stepped out of bounds and the game ended at that point. That was correct. It was not a touchdown. It was an interception, and then he ran out of bounds. So that was, the refs got that one right at the end. So Alabama still won by 3. That was correct. Again, people are going to be looking at that and saying Alabama should not have won that game, which, like I said, again, that is true. They should not have. It required the 4th and 31 conversion to even win that game. But because they're coming off such a bad performance, such a scare, and people are saying they shouldn't have even won that game, even though regardless, they're still in this game, I think, regardless of whether or not that had happened. But I think Alabama's just going to be hearing that, Alabama sucks. They're not that good. They should have lost to Auburn. And yeah, they're not as good as they have been in some years past, but I think they're going to have some drive, some motivation there because they're hearing all that. Whereas Georgia, they could almost do no wrong. They're coming off a nice stretch of games where, of course, they've won every game this season. So Georgia, still sitting undefeated, which I think that's going to put a target on their back. But that is going to make the public probably think, Georgia's undefeated. Of course, they're the better team here. They've beaten Alabama multiple years in a row. They've won 2 championships in a row now, etc. So I think the public is going to be on Georgia for all those reasons and not liking at all what they saw from Alabama last week, thinking Alabama can't hang with Georgia. They couldn't even hang with Auburn, really. They should have lost to Auburn, so how can they possibly do anything against Georgia here? I think that's going to be the general sentiment, even though Georgia didn't really play that well last week either in their rivalry against Georgia Tech. They won, and they did not cover, I believe. I think they won by 8, which that was a game where Georgia was already locked into this game. That was a game where they didn't want to really show anything. They just wanted to get in and get out healthy. So they didn't give it their all in that game against Georgia Tech. And it was a much bigger game for Georgia Tech and being the little brother in that rivalry. So that's what happened in that game. But people are still going to see, well, Georgia still won that game. They've still been getting everything done. They could basically do no wrong here. I lean to Alabama slightly just because they're being shit on so much for what they did last week. That's the way I look there. In the Sun Belt game, this game is being hosted by Troy, who won their side of the Sun Belt, which I think is the weaker side of the Sun Belt, if I'm being honest. This game is at Troy, though, and Troy looks like they're down from a 6-point favorite to a 5.5-point favorite at home, even though it looks like 77% of the tickets, but only 51% of the cash are on Appalachian State on the road. So it looks like Appalachian State might be a little bit of a public underdog there, even though I know there are some professional bettors that like App State here as kind of like a numbers play, saying that App State is actually the better team, which, I don't know if that's the case. I mean, this line is telling you that that is not the case because Troy is getting more than home field here. And Troy has the better defense. App State has the better offense. And they have a really good quarterback, which App State has been more of a running offense in recent years, but their passing game has been really good this year. They have Aguilar, I think is their quarterback's name. He's been really good this year, so they do have that going for them. And I think they're kind of in the more competitive side of the Sun Belt there, but that was the side of the Sun Belt that I think James Madison thought they were going to win all year until they ran into App State, and that was the same week that James Madison was denied their waiver there because James Madison is new to FBS football, so they're in that hiatus period. So they filed with the league, with the NCAA, to try to they petitioned to try, with a few other teams, to try to get into to try to be able to play in the Sun Belt Championship and a bowl game, and it was denied. So the week that happened, they wound up, and College Game Day came into their house, but it seemed like it was more of a negative than a positive for them there, because it was an overtime game that it wound up being. James Madison had dropped from like a double-digit favorite down to like a 9-point favorite, and App State wound up beating them. So that was a big win for App State in that one. People are probably going to remember that game because that was a very public game of the week type of thing on College Game Day. They're a big win for App State. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with the professional guys on this one, because I think the public is going to take that into account, knowing that App State beat James Madison there. They're not going to like what they see out of Troy. Troy is a more defensive team than an offensive team, but I tend to lean with the defenses, although I wouldn't do it because Troy's laying points, but I would lean a little bit to Troy in this one just because of that aspect of it, where they're the team that looks uglier. App State has the flashier offense, and I think that's what the public kind of likes, what they're going to want to be on there. And it looks like you might be getting value on App State. People have seen App State, I think, do more recently. They've been in like some of these bowl games and have looked better than Troy has in recent years. Troy probably even felt like they were not even going to wind up in this game, but they are, and they were in it even last week. They had already clinched their spot in this game, I think, and I forget what they did last week, but they were in a spot where they might have been already looking ahead to this game. Lean to Troy slightly there because they have the better defense. And finally, one more to go, the ACC championship game, another neutral site in Charlotte. This is Louisville at Florida State, and there's a lot going on in this one. Florida State's down from 6.5 to 2.5, and I don't know if the 6.5 was already factoring in the Jordan Travis injury. I think maybe it was, because I think Florida State might have been a bit more of a favorite if Jordan Travis was playing, but it's still dropped all the way to 2.5, man. It looks like Florida State has 57% of the cash, but 55% of tickets. I don't know if that's actually accurate. Maybe they are indeed the public team, but I think there's a lot going on here. So Florida State, they beat Florida last week. It wasn't that impressive of a win, but still, it was a rivalry game. You beat Florida. I think they still covered too. I think they won by 9 in like a game where they were only favored by 6.5, something like that. That line had dropped a lot because Jordan Travis was injured, so that was the injured player theory game for Florida State there, where they rallied around their backup quarterback there. They were able to get it done in that rivalry game. They wanted to remain undefeated as well, so they still have that. Florida State still has the motivation where they could still get into the college football playoff, I think. So I think that's where the motivation still lies for Florida State, which is why I don't think I can go against them here, even though you might argue that in a typical situation where you just played that big game with your backup there in the first game where your star quarterback was injured, you won that game, you played well, you might take a step back in the next game because you won that game. I don't think that can be the case here with Florida State, and the line has dropped so much that I think maybe you're getting a little bit of value on Florida State at this point because it's crashed down to such a small number. And people know Jordan Travis is injured and that he kind of is that Florida State offense. He's the guy that makes that run. So I think that aspect of it, I think, is keeping bettors off of this game a little bit, even though Florida State's the undefeated team here. So it's tough to know which way to lean in this one. But I think that they're not going to have that let down in that second game with their backup quarterback, just because this is a conference championship game, man, and you're undefeated. And if you win, I think if Florida State wins this game, I don't see how they could be kept out of the playoff. Like, there'd be an undefeated team that won the ACC, even though you did it with, even though you don't have Jordan Travis anymore, you're doing it with a backup quarterback. Maybe that's even more impressive if you're able to do that. So I think if they win this game, I think they are going to probably be in the playoffs still. I don't see how they could be denied that as an undefeated team. So, I was just saying, who won the ACC. So I think there's that aspect of it that is going to keep Florida State motivated in this one a little bit and keep them rallying a little bit. However, the injury to Jordan Travis does take away some of the dynamics that Florida State can throw at you on offense, because he's a quarterback that can run around a little bit, and their backup quarterback who's in there now is more of a pocket passer, so that's going to limit what they can do offensively. But again, like I said, there was reason for Florida State to be motivated here, but there, of course, is also reason for Louisville to be motivated here as well. Louisville's coming off a bad game, which I was on. I took Kentucky because Louisville was already locked into this game. Kentucky, that game mattered more to them because Kentucky had been playing poorly in the second half of the season, and they had that big rivalry game against Louisville where they were kind of playing second fiddle to Louisville for most of the season. So Kentucky went in and they were able to get the outright win as a touchdown underdog there against Louisville. Big win for Kentucky. Kind of an ugly loss for Louisville there, but Louisville, again, you can kind of write that off because they were pretty obviously looking ahead to this one. Which I was right about that one in that game. So I think Louisville also is certainly going to be motivated here. They did not expect to be here when the season started, I don't think. And now they're in the ACC championship game, and they're playing a Florida State team who is Jordan Travis less. So Louisville has that like right in front of them, man. So I think they are going to be motivated as well. They didn't even expect that would be the case. I think my slight lean would just be to Florida State here, just because I think people are just still overreacting to that injury, and it's a game where they're still going to have that motivation. They're going to want to still kind of prove something there. So that's the way I look at all those. Back on it real quickly, the two plays that I actually have are Oklahoma State plus 15 and Iowa plus 24. Two gigantic underdogs, man. Hopefully they get there. That's going to do it for College Football Championship Week. Hopefully that was some valuable information there. Hopefully these underdogs can prove their worth, prove their value, and get within those numbers there in those situations that I think are the best situations on the board there. So it's going to do it. I'm Tower Gang Toad on Twitter. You can follow me there. For my political shit posting, go follow the Tower Gang podcast for the most offensive comedy that you will ever see. We had another banger episode tonight where we had Gavin McInnes on. We finally got him on, man. We are the Proud Boys now. We had him on. That was an awesome episode. I had a lot of fun with that one. It was a great episode. Yeah, loved it. So that's I'm going to be putting that up on all the platforms probably later tonight or tomorrow morning. So Tower Gang Pod, you can check us out on all the platforms there. And go check out the guys from Flapper, FLAPPR.net. We continue to have each other's backs, man. We're homies. We lift each other up. We get a little gay about it sometimes, probably. Go check those guys out. They, like me, do some political shit posting. They talk about sports as well, and we all talk about hot ladies. So, yeah, check Flapper out. Check out the Tower Gang Pod. Check me out at Tower Gang Toad. And hopefully we get these wins, man. Better off dead. I'll be back with some NFL stuff probably shortly. I'll stay up late and I'll do it. And I still have to analyze tomorrow's huge sports card as well and all the other sports. It's getting wild, man. I've been running real hot with my bets, man. Not in football, unfortunately, but in every other sport, I have just been crushing. Well, football a couple weeks ago, I had a couple of really good weeks there too. So I've just been so hot, man. In NBA, college basketball, hockey's been pretty good. Those three, I've been like really killing it the last couple weeks, really even. So, yeah, let's get it all done, man. Hopefully these college football plays, which has been my worst sport recently, but hopefully we get it done. Hopefully they come through to finish off the season before we get into the bowls and get into some real motivational discrepancies. All right, man. Peace.